Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering some Discipline Priest class changes that could possibly make them the best healer when it comes to small group content in Dragonflight. And I'm going to be covering this very important news update that maybe you may as well be unaware of, is that Preach has made a personal trip to Blizzard headquarters on his own dime so that he can ask the questions that he wants to ask, not be restricted, not be used as any sort of marketing tool, as is covered in this Wowhead article, which I will have linked in the description for you to check out yourself if you are interested in. But there were some very interesting topics that they covered, and I want to talk about their implications for the upcoming expansions. The big one that jumped off the page was this self-proclaimed third era of Warcraft. So Dragonflight is changing the core game entirely. Whether or not official descriptor, it's been referred to as the third era of World of Warcraft, in the sense that it represents a fundamental change in approach for the long-running MMO. Preach wants to know what's changed internally to drive these redesigns and where the game will go from here. So one of the major talking points was talking about player feedback and approaching the game more so being receptive and responsive to player feedback. So my best hope is that we don't get situations where, Conduit Energy or in Legion now, I'm forgetting the systems like RNG looting from legendaries in Legion, these types of they're really crippling systems that the player base is just outcrying, please make a change to this, please make a change to this. But there's just radio silence. It is what it is. This is the way that we want to make the game. That I think has held back what could have been otherwise amazing expansions towards the starting end of it. Because usually those systems do get changed by the end, but it's why do we have this kind of I don't know how to describe it verbally. It's just why are you kind of restricting yourself from just having the best experience when it is so outspoken by the community in terms of feedback. So it's really good to see that type of responsiveness from them specifically. They talked about old content and evergreen content and trying to find ways of incorporating more of that. Then they go into story and talking about how they want to do multi-expansion stories, so characters aren't just popping out and disappearing expansion to expansion, so you kind of forget who they are, and then maybe they come back in expansion later and try and keep things more congruent. I do think that story has been a big problem for World of Warcraft, although I know I'm normally a PvP player. When I had originally gotten to World of Warcraft, the driving factor was the Warcraft 3 campaign, Arthas, and connecting Illidan and going after them with the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, and having this overarching story that carried these characters over a long span of time, which allowed me to attach to them and care about them. It's kind of been lost with these kind of 2-year chunks of these are the main characters, and then suddenly they're gone, and maybe they come back an expansion or two later, but you've already kind of lost a lot of commitment to them. So going back to this type of storytelling and trying to, drag something out a little bit longer and get more attachment to them so they're not just aimless heads like the Jailer, I think is going to be really good for the game overall in terms of just getting a larger player base, which is good for everybody, Raiders, Mythic Plus players, or PvPers competitively. They talked about Evokers and how they want to make them feel completely different than any other class. And now, having spent a lot of time personally, at least on the Preservation Evoker, it has some similarities to other healers in the sense that it's got a big cooldown or it's got a heal over time effect, but the way that the cooldowns work is unlike the other healers, although they will likely function in the same areas of necessity, like a hard-hitting tank mechanic, maybe with time dilation staggering the damage, similarly to an Iron Bark, but the way that they interact is a bit different. And I'm curious to see what the outplay factors are for them in PvP, like which cooldowns are dispellable or crowd controllable, disruptible, so that there's interactions with the class and things like that. And I'll be covering content like that here on the channel. And if you're interested in future content, like should you main videos, what classes are looking strong, fun, going to be a good fit for you. I'm trying to cover all three of those in a category. It's just not for competitive players, but for people trying to look for a specific role or gameplay style. But it was very interesting to read through this, especially considering that he was able to, talk about whatever he really wanted to talk about because he was there on his own money rather than being paid to go over. They talk about how they made starter builds because there are some players who just do not want to deal with the headache of the talent trees. And, honestly, partly even myself, I have fun with it, but I'm looking at some of these talent trees now and I'm thinking I'm going to need 20 loadouts. And if I play a lot of alts, it's going to be a lot to remember, like, oh, I'm fighting a warlock, I need tremor totem on a shaman. Oh, now there's no warlock, so I can get out of that, go into this one without a tremor, but one with more healing, one with more. It is quite a lot, I'm going to be honest. So I mean, if you're excited for that, I'm very happy for you. But for me personally, I might even end up just trying to get a build that's like, good for most situations. Maybe one or tweaker there when it's like really necessary. And maybe as the expansion goes on, I'll get more and more detailed with it, which is nice to have as a choice. But to start off, I'm probably going to keep things very basic and generic for myself, just because it's so much to take into account. They talk about what do players do in World of Warcraft, like what's the spectrum of skill, pet battlers, high-end mythic race raiders, and this type of stuff. And they talk about how everybody pretty much does everything, right? There's going to be mythic world first race runners that collect pets and do achievements, and there's going to be rank 1 PvPers that also do some mythic plus, and it's everybody doing everything. So it makes content, or makes development a challenge as they try to cater to several different interests, but it's also important for the team to make content for everyone. So trying to make sure that, not just the most competitive level is getting content, and with their focus on the world, with the Dragonflight, like the actual flying of the dragons, hopefully that's going to be the case. And they talk about player housing not really being something right now, just because the engine is not going to be able to support it. Unfortunately, I feel like sadly the engine has been kind of something holding the game back for a while. Makes you think, like, what's the future, like, is there going to be a new engine? What's going on? But actually, based off that most recent point, with trying to like cater to everyone, we've got these class changes for Discipline Priest, and it's already, you can see, really tough, not only just to release content, but to balance classes amongst multiple areas of content. So again, leading back into that post, responding to feedback. This is an update since their most recent nerfs. I don't know why we haven't gotten anything about the Enhancement Shaman nerf, 25%. It would be nice to get something about that. But Discipline Priests were up in arms about some changes here coming forward. It was things specifically about evangelism, but everything else. And Blizzard has released a post about it, reverted some changes, moved some things around to try and listen to that feedback. So hello, priests. Thank you for your feedback on our recent changes to evangelism. Discipline healing scales faster than other healing specializations as target count increases, which makes it challenging for us to tune the spec to be competitive in small scale and large scale content. So this has big implications, because if it scales really well in large scale content, they nerf it there, but bring it up in small scale, it could be really powerful in Mythic Plus or PvP, such as like small group arena battles. To address this, we're changing Sins of the Many to a low level passive and increasing its effectiveness. Discipline is currently overperforming our tuning targets in raids and Dragonflight, so we're doing this alongside several changes to decrease the specialization's overall power. You'll see the following changes as hotfixes to the Dragonflight beta over the coming days. So Sins of the Many is now going to be a 30% increase, up from 12. So tripling that. You're going to be doing a lot of damage as a Discipline Priest in small group content. Damage increase diminishes above 5 atonements was 1. So again, this is all going to work really well in 3v3 arena combat and Mythic Plus content. In the talent tree, Sins of the Many has been replaced with Blaze of Light, which was a PvP talent. Blaze of Light increases the damage of your smite and penance by 8 to 15%, and penance increases or decreases your target's movement speed by 25 to 50%. So getting even more damage on your smite and penance, with Blaze of Light now retiring as a PvP talent, which means in PvP you'll be able to pick up other talents. Evangelism is now going back to 1.5 minute cooldown. This is what I meant by response to feedback. Spell damage heals all targets affected by atonement for 40% of the damage done, was 50, so a minor atonement nerf. Powered Radiance now applies atonement for 60%. They reverted the Radiance change here. And Schism is now only going to increase damage to the target by 15%, down from 25%. Malicious Intent, the duration of Schism is going to be increased by 6 seconds, up from 3, so you're going to get longer duration of it though. Harsh Discipline has been redesigned. Every 10 to 5 casts of Smite, your next penance is free and fires an additional 3 bolts. Was when Atonement had healed 200 to 100 times, your next penance is free and fires 3 additional bolts. So if you're able to get a lot of Smites out with this build specifically, especially with Blaze of Light and the damage bust to Sins of the Many, as a Smite Priest, you could be doing a lot of damage when it comes to small group content and PvP, and that was one of my favorite builds to play, specifically in Shadowlands with all of these enhancements. So I'm very excited to check this out. The things to take into account from this post is that it does seem like raid tuning is the main focus, with some thought onto the other content as well, but we still haven't gotten to like a PvP tuning phase. which I'm very curious to see with how close we are to the expansion. In Shadowlands, I feel like we didn't really see PvP tuning until after it launched. It was kind of like the first 2 weeks were used as gathering data. It seemed, at least to me, if my memory is serving me. So maybe at that time is when we're going to really start to get it. And I mean, PvP tuning is one of the things where it's like, it's not really the biggest deal, at least as long as it's caught when there's things that are like crazy out of control within the first couple of weeks when it comes out. Because normally the start of an expansion is just kind of crazy. And then as long as it's tuned at least before the halfway point, so that we can start, seeing the meta unfold, have some class diversity, and then start push for competitive play towards the end of the season, rewards and getting all that type of stuff. I kind of think that that's all right. I mean, obviously, optimally, you'd want it to have it all be done, but if they're on a strict time clock, they're trying to get this game out in no time here. I don't think that would be the end of the world. We get some gimmicky, cheesy stuff at the beginning, and then that's going to be all corrected as soon as possible. Hopefully we don't have any like prolonged things like Miss of Pandaria, where we had things like Stampede one-shotting people from BM Hunters, or Psyfiend or Blood Fear, and this type of stuff from Warlocks and Shadow Priests. As long as that type of stuff is caught pretty early, I think it's going to be all right, especially considering how responsive they are to feedback. But we'll have to wait and see how responsive they are to, the PvP specific feedback. It seems like we have gotten some posts that do talk about it, specifically, which is nice. But we'll see how it follows forward with actions at that time. If you didn't see my most recent update, the biggest update to Dragonflight, it's covering one of the biggest changes they're making to the game. I'll have that video linked here in just a moment. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. If you'd like to stay up to date with class changes, news, updates, and entertaining PvP content, then do make sure to hit the subscribe button, and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.